What is going on, guys? Welcome to Singletons. I'm Brandon, and today I've got a really awesome budget deck for you guys. This is going to be Verazol Voltron. Today I've got one list for you. It's going to be $50 on paper or 10 tickets in Magic Online. Let's go ahead and get into this. The leader of our Voltron deck is Verazol the Split Current. For X, green, blue, he's a 0/0 legendary creature serpent with 2 abilities. Verazol enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it for each mana spent to cast it, and whenever you cast a kicked spell, you may remove 2 1/1 counters from Verazol. If you do, copy that spell, and you can choose new targets for the copy. Now, most people look at Verazol and they immediately cling to his second ability, because the ability to copy spells is super powerful, so we're seeing Verazol decks all over the place that are just kicker tribal. But what first stood out to me was actually the first ability. He enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it for each mana spent to cast it. This basically nullifies commander tax. Think about it. You've got a 5 mana commander, and the first time it dies, well, now you're going to have to spend 7 mana to cast it again, but you're not getting a 7 mana creature that next time you cast it. It's still going to be the same 5 mana creature, but now you have to pay extra. And then it's a 9 mana creature, but you're still just getting the same old creature. Verazol actually scales with the amount of mana spent to cast him, so you can cast him right away as a 2/2 for 2 mana for just the green and the blue, and then if you get commander tax put onto him, 2 extra generic mana, now you can pay 4, and he's a 4/4. He's not a 2/2 for 4 mana, he's now a 4/4, and then a 6/6, and then an 8/8. And that's not even to mention that because he has X in his casting cost, you can really pay whatever you want to cast him. There's going to be a floor on him because of the commander tax. You're going to have to pay at least 2, and then at least 4, and then at least 6, but you can go as much as you want, and he will get as big as you want him to get. So right off the bat, I really do think Verazol is one of the strongest Voltron commanders you can have. And that leads into the second reason I think he's going to be so powerful. We don't have to spend slots in our deck just to make him bigger. He's going to do that on his own. We're going to do that just by casting him. We're going to make him big, so we don't have to put in those equipments that are just going to add power and toughness to him. So instead, we just get to focus on those Voltron pieces that are going to protect him and allow him to push damage through. Being in green means that we can give Verazol trample pretty easily and don't have to worry about other players chump blocking him. We've got Rancor and Garruk's Uprising. Rancor is the only aura in the deck. It's going to give him +2 power and trample, and then if it ever goes to the graveyard for some reason, we're just going to put it back into our hand. Garruk's Uprising, on the other hand, will give all of our creatures trample, usually just going to matter for Verazol, but you never know. And if we have a 4-power creature on the battlefield when we play Garruk's Uprising, we draw a card, and then after it's already on the field, if we play a creature with 4 power, we'll draw another card. Then, thanks to blue, we have Archetype of Imagination. It's going to give all of our creatures flying, and then it's also going to remove flying from all of our opponent's creatures, so now Verazol can swing over everything and he can't be blocked in the air. Then for equipment, we've got Prowler's Helm and Fire Shrieker. Prowler's Helm means that it can't be blocked by walls, which is basically just going to be unblockable for a 2 mana equipment and 2 to equip, so that's great. And then Fire Shrieker, a little more on the expensive side. It's 3 to cast and 2 to equip, but it gives our creature double strike, which is going to be great when we have a huge creature. It's going to be so easy to one-shot someone. Next, for those protection pieces, we start with Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves. I know you know what those do. They're going to give him haste, and they're going to make it so our opponents can't target our creature. After that, we have Simic Charm. One of the modes on Simic Charm is permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn, so it's half of a heroic intervention for like a 10th of the cost. But if you don't need that half of heroic intervention, you can also give a creature +3/+3 until end of turn. Great if you really need to get that last bit of damage through to finish someone off, and if you really need to, you can return target creature to its owner's hand. The green archetype, Archetype of Endurance, is going to give all of our creatures hexproof and remove hexproof from our opponent's creatures. And then Plaxcaster Frog is a 3 mana frog mutant, 0/0, with Graft 3, meaning it enters the battlefield with 3 1/1 counters on it, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield, we can move a 1/1 counter from this creature onto it. So if we have this on the field and then we cast Verazol, we can just make it 1 bigger by removing a counter from the Frogling, or we can pay 2, target creature with a 1/1 counter on it gains Shroud until end of turn, so it can protect itself, and most importantly, it can protect Verazol. Next, we've established that we want a lot of mana so that we can make Verazol really big, so ramp is going to be super important for us. Now, of course, our deck is going to have a lot of those green staples like Llanowar, Elves, and Cultivate, and I won't really get into those because I know you know what they are, but there are a few that I did want to call attention to. Spring to Mine is one of the Aftermath split cards from Amonkhet. Spring itself is 2 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, shuffle your library, and then at any point after that, you can cast Mind for 4 blue at instant speed, draw 2 cards. This is really great because it's a little bit of ramp and then card draw later in the game when we need to refill our hand. Next is Vastwood Surge, which is 3 and a green to search your library for 2 basic lands, put them onto the battlefield tapped. So it's pretty much explosive vegetation, but better because it has kicker 4. And just because we're not going with the whole kicker tribal thing doesn't mean we can't have any kicker in here. So if we've got the 8 mana to play Vastwood Surge kicked, and we have Verazol on the field, you can remove 2 1/1 counters from it, copy Vastwood Surge, so you're going to search for 4 lands and put them onto the battlefield, and then you're also going to put 4 1/1 counters on each creature you control, which is going to make up for what you took off of Verazol plus 2 more. Last in the ramp category is Myth Unbound. For 2 and a green, it's an enchantment that says your commander costs 1 less to cast for each time it's been cast from the command zone this game, and whenever your commander is put into the command zone from anywhere, draw a card. So it's not exactly ramp, but it is going to make our commander cost less, so I think it still fits in the ramp category. Now, I know that I did make a little bit of a stink earlier about how Verazol doesn't care how much commander tax is on it, but just in case, it never hurts to cut the tax in half. Plus, each time someone tries to remove Verazol, we'll get a card out of it. Speaking of, while ramp is that super important green thing we're going to do to further our game plan, drawing cards is that super important blue thing that we're going to do. Now, of course, we're going to have blue staple draw cards like Muldrifter and Fact or Fiction, but a couple that I did just want to point out for this deck are going to be Thassa's Intervention and Chemister's Insight. Thassa's Intervention is X blue. Look at the top X cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library. So once you've ramped and you have a lot of mana in play, you can dig really deep into your library and find exactly what you're looking for. Or if you don't need to do that or are in a really bad spot, you can counter target spell unless its controller pays twice X. And then Chemister's Insight doesn't actually have any special synergies with our deck. I just wanted to call it out because it's becoming one of my favorite budget cards right now. It's 3 and a blue for an instant, draw 2 cards, and then while it's in your graveyard, it has Jumpstart, so you can discard a card and then cast it and draw 2 more cards. Now I know 8 mana to draw 3 or maybe 4 cards, depending on how you look at it, isn't a great rate, but the fact that you split that up and you cast it once and draw 2, and then you can cast it some point later on in the game to draw 2 more when you need to, I think that makes it a really good card actually. So that's pretty much the core of the deck right there. We're going to ramp, draw cards, play our commander, swing our commander, and protect our commander. But our opponents are also going to be playing this game too, so we do have a few backup plans and ways to kind of help mitigate what they're doing. On the removal end, we've got a handful of counter spells. I think for our deck, the ones to point out are Logic Knot, which is X blue to counter a spell unless its controller pays X. Really great when you have a lot of mana. Plus it has Delve, so we can exile cards from our graveyards to help cast it. And we don't do anything with our graveyard except for that Chemister's Insight, so we'll be able to make it pretty big to counter whatever we need to. And then Plasm Capture, which aside from the mana cost is a strictly better mana drain. This instant is 4 mana, green, blue, for counter target spell. At the beginning of your next pre-combat main phase, add X mana in any combination of colors to your mana pool, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. So you're going to say no to something and then get a whole bunch of mana on your next turn to do whatever you want with. Then on the more permanent side of removal, we have exiling effects in blue, oddly enough. Reality Shift and Curse of Swine will both exile our opponent's creatures at the cost of them getting a new creature token to replace it. Being in blue and green gives us access to Trigon Predator, which I really like. It's 1, a green, and a blue for a 2/3 beast with flying, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may destroy an artifact or an enchantment that player controls. So over the course of a few turns, you can just destroy all of the mana rocks or important enchantments that your opponents are running until they get around to removing it, which could be a minute if you make some more political deals with certain opponents to say, hey, I won't attack you with this if you don't kill it, and I'm going to go destroy that other player's stuff. Then for pure green removal, we have Kenrith's transformation. For 1 and a green enchantment aura. When it enters the battlefield, we draw a card, but also the enchanted creature loses all abilities and becomes a 3/3 green elk creature token, meaning it's perfect to put on commanders because they don't die and go back to the command zone, they just become an elk and they lose all of their special abilities. And then lastly for removal, let's talk about Inscription of Abundance. This is our next kicker spell. Alright, so it's 1 and a green. It has kicker for 2 and a green. It says choose 1, but if the spell was kicked, you can choose all of them or any number of them. So first, put 2 1/1 counters on target creature. Then target player gains X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures they control. Then target creature you control fights another creature you don't control. So on its own, it's a 2 mana instant fight spell, which I think is plenty good for green, but if you can kick it, you actually make that creature bigger first and gain some life off of it. Plus, if you have Verazol on the field and you copy this spell, you'll get the counters back plus 2 more, and you'll gain a whole bunch of life, and you'll get to fight 2 different creatures. I think this is easily the best kicker spell you can put in Verazol that is actually budget enough that we can put it in our list. Now moving on to board wipes, we're in a pretty unfortunate spot here. Green and blue are already really bad at board wiping, and there are a few really good cards in these colors, but because they're one of a few, they tend to be really expensive. So what we can afford to put in the deck, most of them are not very good, so I only fit a few in. Whelming Wave is 2 blue for a sorcery. Return all creatures to their owner's hands except for krakens, leviathans, octopuses, and serpents. This is usually going to bounce everything, but Verazol is a serpent, so it's not going to affect him. Next, Engulf the Shore for 3 and a blue is an instant. Return to their owner's hands all creatures with toughness less than or equal to the number of islands you control. Because we ramp so much, we'll probably have a lot of islands, but not as many as our creatures are big, so we can bounce everything our opponents have and leave what we have. And then finally, Ixodron is 3 blue for a star creature illusion. As it enters the battlefield, turn all other non-token creatures face down, which means they're 2/2s. His power and toughness are then equal to the number of face down creatures on the battlefield. So it's not removal in the sense that your opponents aren't going to have creatures in play anymore, but it is going to be removal in the sense that the creatures they did have aren't going to exist anymore. So this gets around hexproof and indestructible and commanders as well, because a commander getting flipped over doesn't give you the option to put it back in the command zone. It is going to sit there face down until it gets removed some other way. 2 important notes here. Ixodron himself will usually get pretty big because of this ability, so put some of your equipment on it that make it unblockable and it can do some heavy damage. And then point number 2, if a permanent that gets turned face down had counters on it, it's still going to keep those counters. So if Verazol had 8 1/1 counters on it and then gets flipped over, it becomes a 2/2 from Ixodron's ability, but keeps its 8 1/1 counters on it, and now it's a 10/10. Plus, in Commander, the actual trait of Commanderness is tied to a permanent, not to the name of a card. So even if Verazol is face down and it isn't named Verazol anymore, it is still your commander and it is still going to deal commander damage. Alright, so up until this point, we have done pretty much everything that we can do to set our commander up and protect it so that it can get those commander damage victories. But what happens if something does happen to Verazol and we can't use it for that purpose anymore? Well, we've got some backup plans. Multani, Yavimai's avatar, is 4 green for a legendary creature elemental avatar 0/0 with reach, trample. It gets +1/+1 for each land we control and in our graveyard, and you can pay 2, return 2 lands to their owner's hand, and return Multani from the graveyard to your hand. So, in a deck where we ramp a lot, this guy's going to be really big, he's got reach and trample on his own, and we can recur him. Similarly, we have Grun, the Lonely King. I built a 10-ticket deck for Magic Online based on this guy when Dominaria came out, so I already know what he can do, and he's got a very special place in my heart. He's a 5/5 with Kicker 3. If you kick him, he enters with 5 1/1 counters on him, making him a 10/10. And when he attacks alone, you double his power and toughness until end of turn. So if he's kicked and he attacks alone, that's 20 damage right there. You may not get a commander damage victory off of it, but that's still going to be hella scary. We've also got a few ways to make tokens, and the one that I really want to talk about for this deck is Wolfbriar Elemental. 2 green for a 4/4 creature elemental with multi-kicker green, meaning you can kick him as many times as you want as long as you have the green mana to pay for it. When he enters the battlefield, create 2 green wolf creature tokens for each time it was kicked. Now the important thing here is that if you do have Verazol and you're able to copy this spell, you will copy the entire spell, including all of its kicks. So if you cast Wolfbriar kicked 8 times, you're going to cast 2 Wolfbriars kicked 8 times, and that's going to be insane. So guys, there you go. That is my Verazol Voltron list. It is a deck that I was super excited to build and I really love it. I can't wait for more support to come out, whether it's Voltron based blue-green cards or kicker cards for this deck. I really want to keep this around and keep upgrading it. Now, if you'll check the description, you should see a link to the actual deck list if you'd like to go scrub through it there. And go ahead and post in those comments if there's something about this deck that you really like, or maybe I missed a card, something that you think belongs in here. Or just let me know if there's a specific commander or deck theme that you'd really like to see a budget deck about. I'd love to check that out and see what we can do. Well guys, that's all for Singletons this time. I hope you liked the deck, and I hope to see you around for the next one.